bet you have some questions. I'm going to start out with a couple for this enlightened, brilliant panel. And I'd like to start by asking you how you view this area. We live in, by some descriptions, a transit desert. How do we fix that? We have a large system here that VTA runs that seems to be taken by people that have no other option. They are seniors, they're students, but commuters or people with cars are typically just getting in the cars without second thought. And as a result, we don't have a lot of ridership on VTA, and the fare box recovery is 13%. I'm told by Nuria Fernandez, who's the executive director, that there are other measures of effectivity of the system, but clearly with the system where general taxpayers are funding 87% of every ride, we don't have a particularly effective system here today. And if we consider these ideas of short headway, high frequency being important, good geographic coverage, can we have an effective system if we don't get commuters in large numbers to go out and use this public transit system? And if so, what would it take to get commuters out of their cars? What would it take, Mr. Commuter, to get you out of a new car today, as it were? Do you have thoughts on this? And I'd throw this out to anybody.
I can begin with some bad news that will set up the others for some good news. About 7 years ago, Beijing had an experience with terminal gridlock. They had the roads into Beijing in the morning were chock-a-block with people moving along, not unlike our roads in Silicon Valley, except that they reached a tipping point, which occurs at maybe 3, 4, 5 hours being on the road. And at that point, you have to go to the bathroom, or you have to get out and take care of an emergency with a kid, or you have to be at a business meeting. And they got out of their cars, locked the cars, and left them sitting in the freeway. Millions of people did that. For about 7 days, they had a traffic jam that made their roads coming into Beijing unpassable. The capital of China would have been out of business if they hadn't had the fine mass transit system that the professor showed you in his presentation. Now, we're not far from that. Oh, we're not a year or two from it, but we may be a decade or two from it. And it doesn't come like a slow progression. It comes like filling up a wine bottle. I know nobody here drinks wine, but filling up a big fat wine bottle with a narrow neck. When you're filling the bottle, the capacity of the wine bottle, it fills slowly. But when you get up into the neck, it all of a sudden overflows. We're in the neck of capacity of our transportation systems in Silicon Valley. And one of these days, we're going to pour just a little too hard, and it's going to overflow, and we're going to be stuck for days. And it isn't something you can plan for. Now, as we approach that, it's going to become more and more inconvenient for anybody driving on a road, whether it's you and me in a car, whether it's a Google bus, or whether it's an Uber car. You're going to be stuck in the traffic jam. And that's why we want to bundle up as much as we can and use shared transit, shared transportation all we can. But we must have, as Beijing had, a fine off-road mass transportation system that can carry the capacity of our urban area in an emergency and every day also when people just get fed up with the congestion. Transit in America and in California especially is a safety valve. It isn't the first choice for most people, although it will be more for the millennials. But it isn't the first choice for most people. But it will be the choice when you get fed up with being in traffic and you ultimately say, I'm going to use transit. That's when we need that transit system there and functioning well, and we're not far from that now in Santa Clara County. That's what we're trying to plan for, and it takes 10 years to build that kind of system. So we're way behind. In the meantime, these folks are fighting for their life. Uber is trying to help. We're out buying electric cars so we can drive in the HOV lane, which, by the way, will be encumbered along with everything else when the time comes. So we've got to build a mass transportation system. And we have to begin doing land use, like mature communities and infilling around those rail stations. Not everywhere. Those of you who are concerned about density, forget it. Cupertino is never going to be dense. But around a rail station, you can build on top of the rail station and on top of that parking to high density. The Japan Railroad makes about 43% of its money from the land use around the stations, because they go up 50 stories on top of the parking and on top of the stations. We've got to learn to do that. Maybe not 50, but 20 or 30. There's no reason why we can't. On top of the stations, not in your neighborhoods, on top of the stations, on top of the parking, with buffers around from the neighborhood. That force feeds people that want to be there into transit instead of onto your roads. We got to grow up and act like Paris rather than LA.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to take a crack at the question, do we need to get commuters into our public transit system to make that system effective with frequent trips and broad geographic coverage?
My view is we do. I completely agree with Ron that there's an opportunity to go denser right around the transit hubs. This isn't talking about changing all the neighborhoods. This is just around the transit. So you can have mixed use there. I'd argue that the fact that transit systems work, Apple's system is a perfect proof of that. But it's different than the transit we operate today, right? It goes across county lines. Our public transit stops at county lines. Well, guess what? People commuting down from San Francisco don't want to change buses every time they change county lines, right? The schedules aren't even coordinated, so that even if you wanted to change bus, you'd still have to wait between them. We took a look in a couple of my postdocs at real trips that people do based on where the homes are and where the workplaces are. And typically 2/3 of the time was interchange time. That doesn't work, right? That's waiting in the hot California sun for your next vehicle. And then if you miss one, then it's even worse. Then it grows even longer. So what can we learn from that? Very high quality buses with all the conveniences we expect, right? Wi-Fi, maybe even food. You look at European operators, long distance buses, long distance trains, have catering. We should do that to our train system. Why is Caltrain arguing over whether they have a bathroom, right? Let alone like actually having food and Wi-Fi and high quality service. So that's what we need to do to get commuters in. I do think if we make it an attractive proposition and solve the last mile problem, whether it's through Uber or through autonomous cars or through electric two-wheelers that you can carry on board. By the way, if you go with scooters, they fold up to about this size. You can recharge them in your office. They're very comfortable to ride for a couple miles. So now you're talking about a much larger radius around each of your transit stations. We can do this. There are other cities around the world. There are other cities around the US that have done this. We're the technology capital of the world. If we can't apply some of that technology to our own commute patterns, shame on us. I completely agree with your comments that if we can do it everywhere else in the world, why not here?
Well, I think it's a function of time. You've got to do it all. Everything that's at your fingertips. You have to, while you're planning for the mass transit systems, the more sophisticated systems, you have to deploy the last mile systems like the Ubers and like the things that Ryan has done to bring people in from Caltrain and the other stations. So you have to do it all. You can't just put all your marbles in one basket that says, let's just wait for that transit solution. You've got to make it work, you've got to work on now at the same time.
Great. So I had an interesting conversation several years ago. I was elected some 3.5 years ago, took a trip on light rail from Mountain View down to San Jose. It was a Silicon Valley Leadership Group housing rail tour. As we pulled into San Jose, I said to a senior VTA person, "Hey, it looks like that Apple Campus 2 is going to happen." And the VTA person said, "Yeah, that has to be pretty exciting for all of you in Cupertino." And I said, "Yeah." So how are we going to handle transit? What are your plans, VTA? Are you going to build that light rail system that was in the 1992 plan that would come down Stevens Creek Boulevard and then head north toward Caltrain and then points further north? And the answer was no. We don't have any plan anymore to do that. So what do you mean there's no plan? Well, you have to insist that Apple implement a transit demand management program of about a third. So Apple Campus 2 program is at 34%. That's the target. My understanding is that's an ambitious target. It's real work to get enough facilities around to actually make that happen. And then, well, okay, in round numbers, if it's, say, 12,000, and we reduce that by a third, we're down to 8,000 single vehicle occupancy trips. I said, so, hey, Mr. VTA, what do we do with those 8,000 trips? Is there a way we have to mitigate this? And the answer was, I don't know, I guess it's all on them. Is it all on you, or is that the right answer to this problem, or does the public sector really have a role to play? I know that we have asked you, and Mountain View's asked Google, and we've asked all our major employers to do this, and now we have hundreds of companies looking for talent all over the Bay Area imitating you, building these transit systems. Is there an opportunity in all of this for consolidation? Is it fair to ask every tech employer to solve all the housing problems and all of the transit problems that go here? Or should the public sector really be engaged and leading the way? It seems like in the last decade, you guys have gotten so far ahead of us that it's almost like in the answer from the VTA person, they're kind of giving up and saying, we don't know how to handle this in our community. What are your thoughts about this?
I think what works with our system here is this okay? Can you hear now?
It works.
Is express service. And that's what we look at the data of where people live and where they need to get to. Fortunately, we generally know where they need to get to because they're coming to work. I think applying that same data review of trips within the valley, and as I mentioned earlier, more broadly within the region, and working with the public transit agencies to tailor services towards those trips. I know VTA has had some success with their express bus service, but it ends in Palo Alto. If the transit agencies can start to collaborate and start to look at these challenges holistically and from a regional perspective, I think there's a lot of opportunity to address these solutions with transit. I'd be interested to work with Stephen or understand what percentage of the total Bay Area commutes cross county lines. I don't know if you know that, but it's got to be a very high number because a huge portion of our ridership and a huge portion of our employees are coming over at least one county line, in some cases 2 or 3.
It's well over 50%.
As I imagine.
Yeah.
There are 27, pardon me, there are 27 transit agencies in the Bay Area, 27 separate competing transit agencies in the Bay Area. There doesn't need to be. There needs to be one. One.
So I disagree, because if you look at European cities, I grew up in Vienna. It has 22 transit companies, but one plan, one schedule, one ticket, one fare system, one route network. We need one route network, one fare system, one plan, one ticket price. The operators can be many. In fact, you could even imagine opening up private express bus systems to that kind of public ticketing, right? And with today's internet technology, we don't have to have governance issues of having all of these separate entities come together in some sort of Uber merger. Sorry, I apologize for reusing that word. But we can actually coordinate them virtually without having consolidated ownership, because it'll take a decade to do the gigantic merger.
It will never be done.
Yeah, it will never be done.
The Viennese learned to play nicely together when they were children. It never happened in the Bay Area.
Anybody else have thoughts on this question they'd like to share? Okay, so I've heard some bullishness that we can figure out a way to make our transit, our public
Rod, let me
network
say
work.
one more thing
Yeah?
about our system.
Okay,
We have, in California, except for San Francisco, bits and pieces of a transit system. They're good bits and pieces. They were built according to a very good master plan at one point. Rod referred to it. Master plan had a line down Stevens Creek. It had a line down the Permanente system, on up Foothill Expressway to Palo Alto, and on over into Mountain View, and so on and so on. But that plan done in the 70s and 80s has been abandoned. So now we have bits and pieces of various plans that don't connect. And we don't have enough money to build them out. That, plus the fact that we're providing free transit as a social service to seniors, youth, students, welfare recipients, they all get reduced rate transit tickets. Well, if you want to run a social welfare system and call it a transit agency, you can't hold it responsible for paying for itself. So you can't blame our transit system for having a low fare box recovery. It wasn't designed to have a fare box recovery. It was designed to be a social program. But it is never going to work until we complete it according to a carefully designed master plan. That's why we have to do this next round of careful studies under FTA's guidance, so we do a new master plan.
okay. What do we think about autonomous vehicles as the future? Could we think about a future 20 years from now where we have actually fewer buses, little public infrastructure, and we have only circulating autonomous pools of shared vehicles provided by private employers? Maybe the public sector offers subsidy to those folks that can't pay for the Uber pool ride. Can we imagine a future without all the buses in circulation? Or do we need that public network?
So
And if so, where?
autonomous vehicles, in my view, are a double-edged sword. If you do them in isolation, they can actually lead to getting worse congestion. Because if every one of us still owns them individually, still drives them with one person per car, 1.2 persons per car, which is the statistic today, right? We're mostly faring around nearly 4 empty seats. Or if you drive a bigger car, maybe 6 empty seats. And if we start sending our autonomous car to the corner grocery store to pick up the milk, separate runs to pick up our kids to go to soccer practice, we're going to generate more trips, we're going to generate more vehicle miles traveled, and we won't have actually increased the density. Yes, we get some benefit. If you look at a typical freeway lane, if the entire fleet is autonomous, which is at least 20 years off before the whole fleet really converts, then we get an increase in density. We could get some of that by converting our carpool lanes into autonomous-only lanes. We've looked at that somewhere between a 6 and 8-fold increase. So if you think about that for a full freeway, 4 lanes turns into 32 lanes, that's a pretty big deal. But that's a long-term end state. In the meantime, we've still got to live with this mixed traffic, right? There'll be some autonomous, there'll be some human-driven, and the interaction's not good if we allow that to happen unconstrained. So my view is autonomy is a very good tool as part of the toolkit. It's a great solution for the last mile problem because the cars can pick up people, go back, and then immediately be reused. They have to be combined with a sharing system. If we still all own them individually, we haven't changed the utilization pattern at all. They'll still be, we'll buy them to park them. Now they'll park themselves, but they'll still be parked. right? So we have to combine autonomy with these other levers. We do need that high-density backbone. You made the point. If you look at an autonomous car, it doesn't change the capacity unless I put more people in it. And a bus will still be, in a normal traffic lane, if you just drive single occupancy vehicles, you can run about 1,900 cars per hour. If you put one person in, it's 1,900 people per hour. Bus is about 20,000. A light rail or heavy rail system can get you to 40, even 60,000 for that same amount of space. So we still need that high throughput backbone, and we need to have autonomy to fill in the gaps to ensure access, to ensure our social program so that somebody who can't necessarily afford their own car still has access to the transit system in a better way. But we shouldn't think about autonomy in isolation as a panacea. It's an important piece, but it's got to come together into the
How
system.
about autonomous buses?
Autonomous buses are a great solution because you can, again, increase that spacing.
Is that a hit?
No, that's talking to my friends at Google, you know.
I mean, we've talked about autonomous express buses, which would allow you, if you had it as a separate operator, it could be a public-private partnership. How do you get those cross-county lines? How do you get them to run into the neighborhoods and into the corporate campuses as the endpoints, but still run them as a high capacity, whether it's down 85 or down 280? I think that's a great bridge solution.
Probably start with private companies, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're on the edge.
What sort of capacity can we expect out of an all-autonomous vehicle lane on a freeway? If it's around 2,000 today with
I
human...
just said it's the maximum is about 8 times that. So if it goes from 2,000 to 16,000, which is still lower than running a bus, right? Bus is 20, 25,000, but obviously a lot better than having one person per car.
Okay. I've heard other experts say 25, 30% figure of merit, but you think it can be much more than
Again, I'm talking about if it's autonomous only.
Yes.
If you're talking mixed use, yeah, you get a slight increase, but you still have to deal with the humans who need enough space to be able to respond and react, right? We need at least a second of reaction time to the car ahead of us, which at 60 miles an hour is 5 or 6 car lengths. So you're talking about a lot of dead space between cars just to be safe.
And that's autonomous with one driver, no passengers. So if you have 2 or 3
That's right.
passengers,
And you're
then it's
increasing. That's right.
Sure.
2 or 3, the 8x.
That's right.
Got it.
Yeah, you'd want autonomous with a sort of Uber pool combination, right? Then you're talking about a real capacity increase. Or autonomous as a bus, because again, then you're talking about a lot more people for the same footprint.
Could I ask a social
Please.
question? I think the autonomous vehicle has some real potential, and we need to pursue it in mature, whatever capacity we can obtain, even if it's a bus. But the same people that won't let you take their gun and want to put it in the back of a pickup with great big tires that they're never going to use, that can zoom up and down this road with loud pipes, are not going to ever get in an autonomous vehicle. And that's about 25% of your population. And as long as you got that, those 25% of those testosterone-burdened rascals out there, I don't know how you're going to have an automated vehicle system work effectively. You're going to have nuts zooming in and out. And you'll require state legislation to say, you will all ride in an autonomous vehicle. They'll get shot. I don't know how it's going to work. Socially, I don't know how it will be implemented. In California, certainly not Texas.
Luckily, we don't have open carry here, so we can have open riding of autonomous vehicles.
Yes.
All right.
By the way, my experience is, yes, more than a third of people are skeptical about riding autonomous cars. If most car companies have done surveys, 30, 40% of car owners today say, I would never get into an autonomous car. When you actually let them experience it, my experience is it takes about 20 minutes for them to become fans. So I think we ought to see how that evolves over time. Similar to riding a Tesla, most people who get into Tesla wind up wanting one. So it's a pretty good experience when you actually do it.
I've never been in one, and I want one.
And just before we move on and totally lose it, I want to step back from autonomous vehicles for a second and talk about sort of like one of the benefits of sharing that Professor Heck was talking about with sort of the general idea of right sizing. And this isn't something that we have to wait for autonomous vehicles to do, right? By moving away from personal automobiles, there's a lot of opportunities for us to right size our car usage. For example, say, using, Car2Go, which is like an on-demand smart car in various cities, or using UberX for small commuting trips, and then, go rent a Zip car pickup for when you need to go to the hardware store. This is one of the huge benefits of a sharing type system, whether autonomous or not.
Yeah, what we actually want is the bundled a two-wheel electric scooter with your small electric car with a couple days of a pickup truck or an SUV when you really want to go carry a load or go to Tahoe, right? That's what we really need. We don't need the big car all the time guzzling gas.
I have a question here from the audience asking if there is intelligence that can be added in the current infrastructure to improve the transit experience. You have, today with Uber, you have some control. You see where the cars are that could come and pick you up. You see what the latency is. You have a sense that you're in control somehow. They seem like very simple ideas, but that innovation has changed the way many of us look at that sort of experience. Are there other things that can be done? You talked about tickets, have a single experience all the way through. Are there other things that can be done to add intelligence to our networks?
I would say it exists.
In the near future, yeah.
It's called Move It. You can all download it onto your iPhone today.
Yeah.
If any of you know Waze, I'm sorry to tout a Google product.
That's right.
But Waze is the equivalent for cars. Move It, or if you go to Europe, it's City Mapper. Basically allows you that. Where's the bus? When is it coming? How crowded is it? Where does it go? What's the optimal route? We have all these applications. What we don't yet have, which requires Ron's point about we need to integrate the systems, is that doesn't change the fact that our current routes end at the county boundaries. It doesn't change the fact that you need to buy separate tickets. Both of those companies, City Mapper and Move It, would love to have ticket purchasing integrated, but we need to have the data systems, and the public agencies need to get involved, in the regulators to say this has to be required to interoperate. Right? I'm sure it would make life a lot easier for Apple too if people could actually have one app to plan all their rides, including your own express buses plus public buses where that makes sense.
Let me remind us that there are some routes that don't stop at county boundary lines or transit agency boundary lines. There are commuter rail systems. And BART will be in the county within the next couple of years. Those are high-capacity transit systems that suffer for the lack of the first and last mile connection. Uber can help that. Automated guideway transit systems can help that. Some elements of the bus system can help. So we have the rudiments of a good transit system. We just got to glue them together with a good alternative analysis, federal government approved environmental clearance, and then maybe $20 million.
Okay.
I think it's been interesting to watch transit agencies open up their schedules via various APIs, and over the last few years watching developers kind of chew through that data and create apps like Move It. And I know Nuria, our fearless leader in VTA, has recently broken ground on the Transit Center for Innovation, further accelerating partnerships with some of these small app developers and the large amounts of data that are coming out of transit agencies. So I think we're really just at the beginning of this, and so it'll be interesting to watch over the next few years as that data becomes more and more open, and these developers get their teeth into it.
I'm consolidating a couple of questions here. It said that from the last two sales tax measures in the county, 2000, 2008, about 80% of the money has gone into funding BART. And in this next measure, 2016, it looks like about a third of the measure, the proposed half-cent measure, if that in fact goes forward, would also go to BART. Is BART the answer? BART to downtown San Jose, does that resolve traffic congestion in Silicon Valley, or do we need to do more?
It helps. It does. BART is important for a couple of reasons. First, it does help because it will bring people into your central interchange points, and it'll make then light rail more effective, and your busways more effective, and it'll make Uber more effective. And if we can get an ATN to the airport, it'll make the airport more effective. So BART's important because it'll make transit more effective, but it also is important because it'll prove to ourselves that we can do big things again. We've gotten shy of doing big things. We can still do it. BART's the first step. Completion of the commuter rail systems, turning them all into electric trains, extending them to the extension, the maximum extremes of their potential, having electrically powered Caltrain coming out of Monterey, Watsonville, Salinas, Santa Cruz, Hollister, Permanente each day, instead of just out of Gilroy and San Jose. Those are all possible. And those are your inter-county connections that you're tying up Google buses in now. Then you're down to first and last mile connections, which are a little more manageable at the local level.
Stefan, you talked about bikes and e-bikes in particular. I'm wondering what it would take to make people feel safe enough to choose biking as a commute alternative. I know in my experience, mostly it's been going to points north Sunnyvale, north Santa Clara, and riding on those streets, frankly, in morning commute or afternoon commute is pretty intimidating. What would it take for us to make bikeways that would make people comfortable getting on their bikes, getting some exercise, and having a great experience with the connection to transit, whatever that is?
I think it's very simple. One is we have to open the trails to actually electric bikes. That's actually a local jurisdiction can grant an exception, already possible under California law. By default, they're not open to any kind of motorized vehicle, including electric scooters, electric bikes. Mountain View has done that exactly. The second is similar to our issue about the bus systems. The bike trails stop at city boundaries. So we need to get the neighboring cities together so that you can actually go from Cupertino to Sunnyvale to Mountain View to Palo Alto. Because people don't live and commute just in one city. Guess what? Surprise, right? So that's interconnecting those systems, planning them together, making sure that the core routes connect. Related to that, a good transit system isn't just one line, right? Caltrain is a great way to get down the peninsula, but what we really need is a grid system that's interconnected. That's you look at the road map, right? We don't have one highway running down Silicon Valley. We have multiple highways and interconnections going across. So we need that for our bike system. And then the third is we underinvest in the bike infrastructure. There's plenty of examples. You go anywhere else in the world. Frankly, you can even go to Pittsburgh now, and they've changed the way that the bike trails are built. They need to be separated from the cars. I don't let my daughter bike to school alone because the cars don't see the little kids, right? So you need an adult with a bigger presence, bigger volume, getting pretty heavy here, to actually be able to be an alert to people driving. So if we can get on the other side of the parked cars as part of a separate tree-lined street, there's plenty of examples, right? You go to the Netherlands, they figure this out. Beijing actually used to do this and then ripped it all up. But many cities are now putting these bike paths in. New York has done so. You can actually convert streets to pedestrian zones, run the bikes down, still give access to the buses, and that's been extremely effective for your high traffic corridors. And I can recommend, in particular, do them as experiments. Don't go through the 10-year planning process. Palo Alto just changed one road. It took 11 years, right, to add a bike trail and change the parking configuration. Do what New York did. We're going to try this. It's a 6-month trial. We'll put some paint. We'll change the parking configuration. If people don't like it, we'll rip it back out. By the way, it's just paint, so it's easy to do. When people loved it, it became permanent. So run it as a series of experiments, get real feedback, see how people like it. Most people can't imagine what a good bike network looks like until they've actually really ridden it. So you have to give people a chance to experience it and make it fun. But it does need to be different from what we do today. The little sharrows that basically are just there to alert drivers that there might be bikes here, they really don't cut it. We need to have a separate path to feel safe.
Rod, we did a study for Caltrans a short time ago of potentially putting bikeways on expressways and freeways. They do it in Canada. The accident rate is lower than in the United States. They have buffers. Some of them are tree-lined buffers. And the bikeway is protected, but they're right there with the cars on the freeways. And what if you were to study putting a bikeway on 85 instead of another freeway lane?
Okay. Well, speaking of 85, I have some questions about it. So there's been a proposal by VTA to put an express lane, or maybe two, down 85. So we'd take, in that case, if there were two, in one section of the freeway, you'd take the median to provide another lane, which would presumably give us about 2,000 cars an hour. Should we do an express lane or two express lanes on 85? Or do you think mass transit is a preferred alternative? Is it time to bite the bullet and say it's time for a gear shift, and we really want to commit as a region to seeing if we can make mass transit work in the 85 corridor?
I think we know the picture of what happens when you put an express lane. Takes several years to approve, several years to build. Things get better for a few years, and then it fills up. So if you want a stopgap solution, that's a nice way to go. But we're just punting the problem down the road. I'm sure you have the answer.
No, I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
If I take that lane for a roadway, will I ever get it back for mass transit
No.
from a political
You
perspective?
can't design it in such a way to convert it at some point.
Well, no, it's political. By the time you want it back for transit, that highway is going to be chock-a-block with cars. You try to take a lane away from a highway that's absolutely crowded with cars, and all those people in the cars are going to say, we're already crowded while you're taking our lane away. So you can never get it back for transit once it goes to highways.
Okay. Anybody from Uber want to express an opinion on this? You're next.
I think infrastructure investment, I mainly focus on how Uber interacts with public transit infrastructure. So personally, I'd be a bit biased, but I think other people probably have better opinions on this than I do.
Okay. Any of you from Apple want to wade into this swamp?
Trying to think out of the box, could you always put the light rail up? I know a lot of Highway 85 has been dug out, and sound barriers have been built up, so maybe we can have our cake and eat it too.
Elevate. So, yeah, I'm told from here north, where we have no more right-of-way, maybe we have to go up, right?
Something to consider.
Okay. Yep, something to consider. There's a question about what plans Apple may have to bring people back and forth to the various locations around town once Apple Campus 2 is built in some sort of efficient way. Do you have thoughts about how you're going to get people just within Cupertino?
Circulation is a big part of our challenge. Bringing thousands of people to campus each day without a car means that we need to get them around during the day. And at this point, we've saturated a lot of the real estate market here. So we have buildings literally throughout Cupertino today, and we are circulating hundreds and hundreds of people throughout the region today, whether it's by bike or people on foot or using some of our demand response shuttles or our fixed route shuttles.
Car sharing.
We plan to continue that as part of our mobility system throughout the business day and our business operations. And we think that it complements the local mobility for Cupertino as well. So I think we absolutely continue to circulate people throughout the city.
Could I say something about what Apple is going through? It isn't just Apple. The old economic formula is that when you add an original job or a top-end job into a community, you add 7 more local serving jobs. Now, it isn't quite that many with Apple because you have outsourcing out of the community on some of your subcontractors. But in terms of the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, there are going to be a lot of those jobs added to Cupertino to serve the new Apple employees. And that's good. I got grandbabies, I want them to have jobs. So I'm not complaining about the jobs. But the problem is bigger than what Apple is facing right now. They're doing the best they can to meet their needs. But there's going to be a bigger need in Cupertino than just meeting Apple's needs. And you can't avoid it.
So let's say that we chose not to grow any more at all in Cupertino,
You can't do it.
but we have people building housing to the south, and we have jobs being continually built to the north. What happens in that scenario?
Ron, I think if you decided in Cupertino not to grow at all, your city council would be recalled. And I like you. I like you. Don't leave. We need you. So there's no such thing. I'm a tree-hugging environmentalist, chair of the region's League of Conservation Voters. So you're not going to find an environmentalist stronger than I am. But I can tell you right now, no growth is impossible in Silicon Valley or throughout California. You're going to grow. If you decide you're not going to grow and you don't build accommodations, then you're going to grow anyway and you won't have the accommodations. So plan on growth. Focus it around your transit, but plan on growth. And then bring your housing and your jobs as close as you can, either by building near your jobs or building at jobs and housing at either end of a transit line. You got to do that now. And unfortunately, sometimes our NIMBYs don't help us there.
Let me put it in really stark terms. We have a city in the US that stopped innovating and stopped growing. It's called Detroit. We don't want to be Detroit. So if it's not our choice, we got 2 other options. We can continue to do what we did for 50 years with the Soviet Union and play mutual assured destructions. We each say, oh, we don't want growth here, but we do want jobs and we want the economy to grow. We want Apple to stay here. We want Google to stay here, but put it somewhere else. Well, we're just undermining each other, right? Mountain View sends them to Palo Alto, Palo Alto sends them to Cupertino. That doesn't work. We have to get together on a regional basis. We have to go back to, as you have been advocating, to really build a regional plan again. And we need federal money because the infrastructure expenses are large. But we need to do it in a modern way where we're actually taking into account autonomy that's coming, the sharing system that needs to be there for the last mile. And we need to have a regional integrated solution. That's the way we can get growth, we can get density, higher buildings around the transit hubs, we can maintain the neighborhoods that we all love and the feeling we like, and still have vibrant companies that are leading the world to be here. We want all of those. That's our choice. I don't want to be in Detroit, and I don't want to go play nuclear detente with the other cities. Neither of those are good options.
Very good.
Very good.
Okay, I have a question about ultralight transit versus conventional, more proven alternatives. You had some slides of pod cars and ultralight vehicles. It said that these things might be suspended from the likes of light poles. They might be allow us to go completely vertically and not interrupt the infrastructure, except, yes, we do need stations in places. I've seen Skytran up at Moffett Field with 2 people per car. I've seen Cybertran that has recently made me a proposal, said we could fix your problems at a fraction of the cost of conventional rail or bus solutions. What are your thoughts about this? Is this stuff ready for prime time?
Yeah,
Does it have the capacity? Can it work?
Rod, I'll say they're ready for prime time with a caveat. I know the mode that's in operation at Heathrow is ready for prime time. It's serving now. Dubai is ready for prime time. They're different. But they haven't been certified in the United States. Morgantown has a very old system that's old technology, but it's running a route, kind of like a bus circulator around Morgantown University. Before that'll be certified for funding by FTA, they're going to want to see an operating model. And I've told the folks out at Moffett, go to FTA, propose to them doing a model to circulate the Moffett Field Industrial Park and get Mountain View to go in with you. And in doing so, prove your concept. And they haven't been willing to do it. And I don't know whether they're shy of having the capacity or whether FTA hasn't embraced them. But you've got to have an operating model to prove the viability in the U.S. to the Federal Transit Administration. You do that first by doing the alternative analysis and environmental clearance. And then you build the model. And that isn't a little model train. That's an operating, physically capable model that would serve an area like the Google campus and Mountain View and the Caltrain and the light rail systems and the Altamont Express that goes through that area. That'd be an ideal opportunity. I think they could get the funding, but they got to do it.
Okay. Any other thoughts on these technologies, these new technologies, running guideways? No?
Now, the technology, the inventors of the technology say that it will do the same thing that light rail will do. But there's no model in the world now in operation that's designed to do that. And that would take thousands of cars running 1 minute apart with 4 or 5 people per car running in an elevated structure, say over 85 or Stevens Creek or whatever. And it doesn't exist anywhere. And nobody's going to fund that until it's proven that it will work.
Very good. So if we look at our corporate friends here, if we do have many, many companies searching all over the Bay Area for talent, building what you've built, but don't really have critical mass, do you see an opportunity for consolidation? Do you see these companies getting together? Do you know if it's already happening or not? What is our transit agency or what are leading thinkers doing to try to converge interests and have fewer corporate networks all running in parallel? I mean, it's got to be a little crazy to think about buses from 100 companies running up and down the peninsula. Same way,
I mean, we've certainly
more or
discussed
less the same places every day, right?
We've certainly discussed it, and I know there's been some pilot projects between, I think, Google and Genentech up and down 101. But at the end of the day, a lot of our buses are full, and a lot of the movement is south to north in the morning and north to south in the evening. We're not competing with Caltrain, as far as I can tell. They're still running at capacity, and they're gone to 6-car trains now, and those trains are full as well. So we're supplementing a lot of the interregional transportation, and I think consolidating would be great, but we're still going to need the same number of buses that we have today. So
but I'm guessing the smaller employers may be running less efficiently, less frequently. Is there an opportunity, do you think, for smaller and medium-sized companies to get together?
I think the model works. I mean, I think express bus service that's crossing multiple county lines has proven out to work.
Privately funded.
It's incredibly popular, and if you couple that with effective first and last mile service, that model works. So,
And are you aware of companies getting together to share other than Google and?
I know there was a company called RidePal at some point
Okay.
who tried to take that to market. I know there's some services within San Francisco that are trying to test that out. I'm sure some of the bus suppliers have suggested that to various TMAs. I know Stanford Research Park is looking at potentially more of a aggregated TMA between VMware and Tesla and SAP and some of the other companies up there. So I think you're going to start to see that more and more, certainly as you have these diverse employment centers that require that volume. So that's really what it takes, is we're kind of supplying density on one end of the spectrum, and that's really where it works when you have this point-to-point express service. The more you start to distribute that, the harder it becomes to consolidate. We certainly don't want to have to go to Mountain View on our way to Cupertino, and I don't think people in Mountain View want to go to Cupertino on their way to Mountain View. So, but there's certainly opportunities to consolidate, and I think more broadly speaking, there's opportunities for transit agencies to look at this model.
Thank you. Well, we're just about out of time. I'd like to see if, in 1 minute or less, you have any closing thoughts for us. Who wants to go first?
I'll kick it off. Just based, kind of adding on to Ryan's last comments, is that we do meet with our counterparts at Google and Facebook and some of the others. And so at this point of the game, we look for where the commonalities are in the problem solving. So we you know, there's much of our problem set that is unique, and so, but we're finding more and more of commonality in the solution set. And you know, while we may not share the physical part of the solutions yet, we share process solutions, and I think that's going to grow, and the commonalities are going to grow, and we're going to figure out how we as employers are going to have to work with the transit agencies and public institutions to make it all, weave it all together.
Great.
You know, I think sort of building off of that, when you talk about, you know, it's not just employers that should be you know, working with transit agencies. You know, we also, as a transportation provider, are seeking to work with transit agencies, both through partnerships that are like the ones I went over, and through data sharing agreements, like the one that we're testing out in Boston, right? Trying to figure out how we can best inform local transportation agencies about the, you know, demand patterns that we're seeing, while still maintaining the privacy of our riders. So I think there's huge opportunities for partnership between you know, the public and private transportation sectors to sort of help everyone get the most out of their investments in infrastructure and make the best future investments in infrastructure.
Okay.
Let me paint a bit of a vision. What could we do really near term? We should do the new master plan so we can get federal money. That's a must. We also need to begin to infill the connections that we don't have. So let's start with the lanes we've got. We've got carpool lanes on 85. We've got carpool lane for part of 280. Let's put a public-private express bus of the kind that Apple runs there, aggregating the small companies. RidePal is a good potential player to be hosting that, to be operating that. And let's get the companies together. Who knows, maybe even some Apple or Google employees join that bus as well, because that schedule happens to be more convenient. We can begin to prove out that the system actually can work as a network, because we had a great network plan. We need to get back to a network, not this piecemeal that we have today. That actually helps build the case for then saying, okay, there's enough demand there, let's upgrade to a light rail solution. Let's bring the rail back down into Cupertino. Let's electrify Caltrain and actually make those times much, much faster the way they can be with electric. Then we can actually start to see improvements along the way, and we connect the last mile with electric bike sharing systems, with Uber, with the ability ultimately to do trials with autonomous cars, not 10 years from now, but over the next 2 or 3 years. Right there running today at Slack, in Mountain View, in Detroit, in Germany. Let's bring those here. Let's get them to actually work, and let's guide them to be that last mile solution, because that's actually a problem that we can solve near term. The drive your car anywhere problem is still tough, because we can't handle snow. We can't handle really odd road conditions where the lane markings go away. But the driving around Cupertino, we can solve today. That's a great last mile solution. So that way we can begin to see progress, and we build momentum for the broader group that isn't in this room that actually needs to see it work right here, right now, that doesn't have the time to go to Japan or to Paris or to any of the other places around the world where these transit systems already work. It's just here that we need to convince the rest of our fellow citizens. Last word to you.
It's a tough one. I think it's pretty much summed it up. Thank you for having us, though, Rod.
You're most welcome. I would say snow would be a great problem to have. Did you have something to add?
I haven't closed yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll say only briefly that you need to have a short-term and a long-term vision. A long-term vision, which may depend on some short-term decisions, is your study. To do the alternative analysis and new environmental clearance as quickly as you can in cooperation with VTA. But the West Valley portion needs to be led by West Valley leaders. And then do what you can on the short term, but don't lose corridors by jumping too quickly into something that will become permanent on the short term and limit your long-term opportunities. Because long-term, you need maximum additional capacity, because the Apple campus is just the first of many. It isn't something spectacularly only going to happen once forever in Silicon Valley. It's going to become more typical, and you have to plan for that. Otherwise, the future of Silicon Valley is limited. And I want my babies to have good jobs, so don't limit our future.
Well, I think that will be the last word, and I certainly appreciate all of you coming here this evening and representing these diverse points of view, and hope that our leaders at VTA and around the region are listening. This is an important conversation to have. I appreciate the questions that you've given us tonight, and I would encourage you to support Cupertino Council that's has some initiatives going and trying to make things happen here. And thank you all very much for coming this evening.